For this week's video, I decided to read some of the most banned books in America. And I'm not kidding. PEN America, along with some other companies, have been keeping track of just how many books are being banned in public schools. I was scrolling through lists of these banned books and I realized that I've already read a lot of them. And you probably have too. To Kill a Mockingbird, Of Mice and Men, The Hunger Games, and even The Giver. And that's just to name a few. And these beloved books are being banned in schools all across America. Books that altered my perspective, taught me something new, or helped me understand someone just a little bit more. Books that, yes, cover heavy topics, but books that have changed my perspective and my view on the world in positive ways. So it made me wonder, why are we banning books that help people understand each other? Books that show the messy but real parts of life that a lot of students already face. This week, I picked up 2 of the books from PEN America's list of the most banned books of 2025, because I wanted to find out if the bans might actually be justified. The first book I picked up was number 10 on the list, called Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen. This book has 66 bans. Guys, y'all lied. This book is rated so high on Goodreads. I genuinely went in with such high expectations, but ultimately it flopped. Let me give you guys a summary before I rip into this book. This story follows Jacob Jankowski, who is a vet student at Cornell, and right before he's about to take his final exams, the teachers pull him out of class and let him know some horrible news about his parents. He honestly wants to forget about his life at Cornell and just run away, so he does. And as he's running away, he comes across a moving train that he ends up jumping aboard, and it's here where he comes across a traveling circus, and they just happen to need a vet, and although he's not technically a vet, he's good enough for a circus, so they bring him on board. And then we're following Jacob as he navigates this circus life. Something that was a little bit interesting and unexpected was that we're following Jacob in his young years when he first joins the circus, and then Jacob in his older years at an elderly home where he just has memories of this circus. So this book ends up being somewhat of historical fiction because the author does pull from the Depression time period, and she did a lot of research about circuses and the animals within a circus. But this book focuses on themes of love, abuse, aging, and the harsh realities behind the magic of the circus, which all of that sounds really good in theory, but I don't think the execution was fully there. But first, let's go over the things that I did like. I do believe that the dual timeline added some emotional depth to the storyline because otherwise, Jacob was honestly a pretty bland character. I thought all of the mental and emotional turmoil that the elderly man was experiencing felt really real and resonant of what people in an old folks home might be experiencing. So in those aspects, I did really like it. And I also appreciated how descriptive the writing was. At all points in the story, I was able to visualize exactly what was going on. And this was a little bit disturbing at points, which I'll detail in a little bit. But overall, I really liked how immersive it felt. It really felt like I was watching a movie, even though I was reading a book. I really thought the circus itself was a really interesting setting. I've never read about a circus before, so I really thought that was fun. And I especially liked the author's exploration about the harsh realities of the circus, and I think that the poor treatment of the animals and the workers, although it was hard to read about, was really important to include. But now into the cons, and honestly my list is pretty extensive, so kind of going back to my initial pro, the writing was very descriptive, but at points it felt a little bit overdone, especially in the present timeline where the man is older. Instances that were taking up paragraphs or pages could have been simplified down to a beautiful sentence or two, and I think this would have helped with the flow of the overall book. Most of my gripes, however, came from the past timeline, which is the bulk of the story. In my opinion, Jacob and especially Marlena were completely underdeveloped as characters and especially as romantic interests. There was nothing about their connection that had me swooning or even rooting for them as a character in general. I obviously wanted Marlena out of her situation, but to think that Jacob was the right person for that, I can't be sold on. There genuinely seemed to be zero chemistry between them for me, and I really think they were just trauma bonded to each other, which honestly, I understand, but to assume that the readers would be happy to see them together in the end, I just personally didn't buy. They had very little meaningful interactions, so we really were just supposed to believe that it was a love at first sight type of thing, and I only harp on their relationship so much because that was really the main plot line that we were following. There wasn't much to the story besides this kind of love triangle. Aside from the main romance, we were hearing about some animal abuse and some worker abuse, which, like I said, those parts of the book, I think there was some strong commentary there, but the main focus seemed to be on this romantic connection connection that I didn't find romantic at all. Something else that really bothered me that nobody talked about in reviews was a scene of sexual assault between Jacob and a woman performer in the show. This woman performer does kind of a striptease for men behind closed doors, but one night when Jacob gets really drunk, he's in proximity with this woman and she takes him back to her room and literally violates him, and this scene is not talked about after it happens. It really felt like there was no reason why this scene was included, because even Jacob doesn't have the proper knowledge to talk about this effectively, so it felt completely random and unnatural to just throw in there. There are also a few other scenes that were pretty sexual in nature, but just like weird and uncomfortable and random, and I was honestly confused why they were even included. If I'm being so honest, if I was given this book and asked whether a male or a female author wrote it, I would have bet money on the fact that a male author wrote this book, but a female author wrote it. So it was honestly odd to read such misogynistic undertones and then realize that a woman wrote them. And obviously I understand that the author is writing from a male perspective, but the scenes that were sexual in nature didn't seem to progress the plot in any meaningful way. And although I don't necessarily agree that books should be banned, I do understand how scenes like these, if not properly addressed by the author or handled in delicate ways, could end up causing harm to the readers. Okay, I need to be done complaining now, so let me give you guys my final review. This book was ultimately fine for me. It was an entertaining enough story, but I don't think I would recommend it to most people, so I'm going to give this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars. And I honestly think it might be better suited as a movie. The visual strengths of the writing and the dramatic setting I think would be really entertaining to watch on screen, and I think seeing the couple together would actually make the character arcs and the romance a little bit more believable than they were on page. And I do know that there is a movie out, so maybe I'll watch it, and then maybe I'll get back to you on whether I think the movie is worth the watch. Do I think Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen should be banned from public schools? No, I don't think it should be banned, but I do think that the sexual content in the book should be something that's noted, because I would hate for a young adult to go into the book without expecting to read a scene as traumatizing as the one mentioned. But ultimately, I'm not even the one who decides whether or not a book should be banned. So have you guys read this book, and do you think it should be banned? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear what you think. I hope the next book I like way more. Cross your fingers for me, please. The next book I picked up was number 2 on the list, Looking for Alaska by John Green. This book has 97 bans. Guys, I finished Looking for Alaska by John Green this morning, and I'm ultimately super confused because both of these books were just like mid. So I don't understand why there was so much fuss about getting these banned from so many schools. Let me give you guys a summary and then maybe it'll make more sense. This story follows a teen named Miles Halter who lives a pretty boring life in Florida with his 2 parents, so he decides that he wants to go to a boarding school in Alabama called Culver Creek. His dad actually went there when he was younger, but that's not even necessarily the reason why Miles wants to go. Miles is dedicated to go to this school because he wants to discover the great perhaps. And it's basically just him wanting to discover what more the world has to offer. So he goes to this boarding school, and it's there where he meets a group of friends. And among these friends is a girl named Alaska Young. And she is like nobody Miles has ever met before. She's incredibly mysterious, but she says random things. They have super fun conversations. And all of this interests him so much, and he ends up really liking her and ultimately falling in love with her. But just when Miles feels like he's finding his place and he's finally understanding the true meaning of the great perhaps, an unexpected event completely turns this book around. So the entire book revolves around this one plot point that completely changes not only Miles but his friend group's lives. So at the beginning of the book, we're following a before perspective, and after we're following an after perspective. Okay, now for my opinion on the book. I really did like this friend group. I thought they were really fun, and I thought the characters were diverse enough that if I were given a sentence or two about what they were doing or what they said, I feel like I could identify which character said it, which is a really good sign because that means the author did their job in personifying these characters. With Miles and Alaska in particular, it seems like they're trying to always make things be more profound than they actually are. And I am struggling with this a little bit because I do think that when you're younger, everything feels really big. So in that way, I think John Green did a good job encapsulating that feeling. But Alaska in particular is just so I don't know, she really is hard to understand, and her mysterious nature did keep the book really interesting. Genuinely, there were no points at which I wanted to put the book down. I felt that getting through the book was extremely easy and it was entertaining, and I don't usually love a book that doesn't have a strong plot, and I specifically never reach for coming of age books, but I actually liked this one okay. Because I will also mention that about halfway through, that's when the event happens and it completely tone shifts, so then you're kind of following like a mystery plot line almost. And although there is a heavy theme of grief in the book, I feel like John Green handled it well and handled it really accurately. All of the characters deal with it in their own unique ways, and we get to follow the main character's way of grieving, which I feel like made total sense from the perspective that he was coming at it from. So yeah, ultimately, Alaska Young is a bit Debbie Ryan coded, but I liked all of the other characters just fine, and she's ultimately what made the story entertaining, so I'm gonna give her a pass. Overall, I'd rate this book a 3 out of 5. I didn't hate it, I didn't love it, but it's better than average. So should this book be banned from public schools? Definitely not. If anything, it should be in public schools because I think reading about characters that you might relate to and reading about struggles that you might be going through or that you might go through in the future is actually incredibly important. So although I understand that parents don't want to recommend this book because there's drinking and smoking and some sexual scenes, although not really, banning this book from a public school will, one, only make kids curious because when you're not allowed to do something, you just want to do it that much more. And also banning it won't actually prevent your kids from smoking and drinking. They're probably already doing that. But those are just my thoughts. If you've read this book, please let me know what you thought about it. Do you think this book should be banned in public schools? Let me know in the comments. I would love to know. If you came to this video for recommendations, I personally would recommend looking for Alaska, but if Water for Elephants sounded more entertaining, give it a read. Because ultimately, we're different people, so we might find enjoyment in different things. I think there's a lot of material in here that could actually help teens get through grief and feel a little bit more seen in their opinions regarding their crushes and friend dynamics. So yeah, I would recommend this book. I didn't necessarily love this book. Now that I've read these two, I'll be honest, they didn't hit me in the way that I thought they would. But reading is so personal. These same books can make someone else feel seen in a way they never have before. For some, reading about complicated and messy things might be the only time they ever feel truly heard and understood. And for students that don't relate, books like these can offer the empathy and understanding needed to fully sympathize with somebody else's reality. Books can shift our outlook. They can start conversations that matter. And banning them doesn't make those hard topics go away. It just makes it so much harder to talk about them. Because the danger of banning books isn't about the books themselves. It's about who loses access. Not every student has the ability to go out and buy whatever story they're curious about. Some students rely on their library, and they have to hope that they have books there that relate to them. So no, these books didn't change my life, but they might change yours. And that's exactly why we should keep reading banned books. Because if someone's trying to keep us from reading it, it's probably worth trying to find out why. Bye.